Good morning from the very foggy Slate Peninsula on the Isle of Skye. Since I was here 9 years ago, this island seems to have become a very, very popular tourist destination. I had a difficult time finding a place to stay. Nearly everything seemed to be booked, which is why I ended up sleeping in a yurt. Of course, I have deluded myself into thinking that I am a traveler and not a tourist, and therefore not part of the problem. My plan for the next couple days is to try to find places off of the beaten path and avoid large groups of people. So, if you're looking for a video of Ferry Glen and the Quirang and some other Instagram famous places, this isn't it. But if you, like me, enjoy the feeling of solitude in magnificent landscapes, well, come along for the ride. In order to avoid the crowds on Skye, I decided to get on a ferry and leave for Raasay, an island to the east with 161 inhabitants. But I wanted to get some coffee and breakfast first, so I continued past the ferry and got some coffee and pastries at the Slaachen Hotel, which happens to have a very nice old bridge next to it, which was built in the early 1800s. It was a good thing I stopped for breakfast because these foggy conditions delayed the 8:30 ferry by about 2 hours. My grand plan to avoid crowds seemed to be thwarted by this large gathering waiting to get on the ferry. But it turns out that they're all headed to a bagpipe festival, so I won't have to worry about them. This ferry, the Haleg, is just a teeny bit larger and more modern than the one I took yesterday. Honestly, I'm surprised it was delayed at all, considering these must be pretty normal conditions around here. As the island draws near, I can make out the coastline, but anything even a little bit inland is completely shrouded in fog.
Onto the Isle of Raasay.
All of the cars went to the right, so I'm going left. Raasay has a very different feel to Skye. Near the main village, there are these incredible old-growth forests that took me completely by surprise. While doing some planning for this trip, I was looking at the map of Skye and noticed Raasay. I saw there was a ferry and a few roads on the island, and that was more than enough to convince me to visit, and I'm so glad I did. I did try to find a place to stay here, but I couldn't find anything that was even close to reasonable. When an economy twin is $400 a night, I am out. As long as the foggy conditions don't prevent me from returning to Skye, this seems like a fine target for a day trip. I seem to have picked up a travel companion, and he really doesn't want to let me pass. This place is so cool. Not far up the road are the remains of the once imposing Castle Brochel, built somewhere around the year 1500 atop a volcanic plug. It was last inhabited around 1671 and has fallen into considerable disrepair since William Daniel painted it in 1819. It was owned by the MacLeod clan and was important for guarding sea routes in an area that was once a haven for pirates. Today, the area is considerably sleepier and feels a bit mysterious, shrouded in mist. This is Calum's Road. And the story is that the man living 3 miles down the road was so tired of asking the council to pave his road that he did it himself with a wheelbarrow and a pickaxe and a shovel. And that's why we can still ride to the end here. I found a little walk-in guidebook at the Yurt that showed a flying pig sign on Calum's Road, so of course I had to go find it. So I got the story slightly wrong, but Calum MacLeod, of the same clan who owned the castle back there, single-handedly turned a single-track walking path into a drivable road over the course of 10 years in the 1960s and 70s. It was later paved in the 80s by the council. When you see this road, you will understand what a remarkable feat that was.
That's it. It's the end of the public road. Wait, where was the pig sign?
In one of the inlets, there is an old sheep pen built from whatever rocks were around, and given the tin roof and wire fencing, I reckon it was still in use not too long ago. I'm so sad. There was supposed to be a little flying pig for the bumps here. But I reckon this is all that's left. The pig is gone. The sign used to be red too. Rats. I don't think I'll put my own pig on there, as tempting as that is. Well, there's no pig on the sign anymore. But let's see if we can get this little piggy to jump. I later spoke to a local woman who said that the pig was removed by the same road council who left it to Calum to build his own road, and that they had no sense of humor. I mentioned that I didn't put my pig sticker on there, to which she replied, "Why not?" with a mischievous smile. I gave her a couple, and she promised to stick one on next time she visited Calum's road. Back past Calum's wheelbarrow and Castle Brochel, there are very few roads on Raasay, but I certainly don't mind backtracking on roads like this, especially when they look different every 5 minutes. You just have to stay vigilant on the blind corners, even more so when you feel like you have the place to yourself. This place is pretty magical. I love how the clouds and fog interact with the island. Across the water is one of the smaller hills on Skye, just south of Portree. As I near the village again, I go back through the forest. This part seems to have some Sitka spruce, which is native to Alaska and the West Coast and was introduced to the UK in 1831 for timber purposes. It stands in stark contrast to the more irregular natural forest. I stopped at the community store for a sandwich and some olives. This tiny store had a pretty remarkable selection of produce and meats and other staples. South of town is another coastal road that wraps around the bottom of the island. In the early 1900s, there was a pretty serious iron ore operation here. On the left is the remains of the workshop and offices, and straight ahead is the pier where the processed iron ore was loaded onto ships. Here it is at the height of production in 1917. This is also where the ferry to Raasay used to dock, which was replaced by the new ferry terminal just outside the village in 2010. So here we are at the old pier in Raasay. And this is where they used to load all the iron ore coming from the quarry up the mountain onto boats. And there was a railway right up through there. After the First World War, demand for iron dropped significantly, but the plant was kept in working order up until the onset of the Second World War, when the iron structures were all scrapped. Look at that mountain behind there, just appearing out of the clouds. I continued south along the road, but there isn't too much to see when it's foggy like this. If the skies were clear, there would be spectacular views of Skye. But not today. This is the end of the road, so I turned around and headed back the way I came. Past the iron ore pier again, and that seaside shed that I found so aesthetically pleasing. Despite the sunny skies at the south of the island, you can see that the ferry terminal up there is still cloaked in fog. I listened to a piper getting warmed up and chatted with a lovely old woman who promised to put a piggy sticker on the sign on Calum's road. Hopefully the ferry isn't delayed due to conditions like it was this morning. She mentioned that people had spent the night in the ferry terminal on more than one occasion. But before long, the ferry emerged from the dense mist. It could be heard well before it could be seen. If you can believe it, there was not much to see on this ferry ride. My plan now is to find some food. I heard there was a good seafood stand not terribly far away in Carbust. A little more fog and a little more sunshine, and I found my way to some very fresh oysters and smoked trout. The dining area looked out on the Coolin Hills. I asked Google how to get to the ferry pools, and it tried to take me through some hiking trails, with a locked gate of course, so I backtracked again. The stream of cars emerging from this dead-end road should have been a sign to find somewhere else. But I can be pretty dense sometimes, and the beautiful views of the mountains were luring me in. It seems to me that this road was not designed for this level of traffic. And after the tranquility of Raasay, I didn't have a lot of patience. That tan squiggle carving its way up the hill is the new footpath for the ferry pools to accommodate all of the visitors it now gets. And this is the new car park that holds over 150 cars. Yikes. I can't believe the trail is so visible from here. 9 years ago, there was a boggy path and a stream you had to wade through. This is insane. There are so many waterfalls and streams on Skye, it seems silly for this one to get this much attention. I did not stick around. It looked like an ant trail going up the mountain. Instead, I followed the road to the end on Loch Brochel, which has a nice beach and a very large caravan park. This is a lovely little farm, but I don't think this dead-end road would get another visit on a future trip. On the way back, I found a little waterfall just off of the road, and there weren't a million people there either. The fog from the other side of the mountains is just starting to pour over the edge into the valley. On the way back to the yurt, I pass a lovely view of Loch Harport and the River Drynach, which runs into it. And just like the rest of the day, a few miles down the road, and I'm in the clouds again. I found a little coastal road to bypass the main A road, but it was not to be.
God damn it. That's not cool, man. What's wrong with the rest of the road? Oh well.
You can see the salmon farms in the bay, and the south end of Raasay is on the other side. This is the main road I was trying to bypass. I picked up some beer and sausage rolls in Broadford and headed back to the yurt for the evening. It was a bit chillier this evening, so I enjoyed the use of the wood stove. And here is the yurt. The door is a little small to fit through with moto gear and a backpack. If you're still here, thanks for coming along.
Pardon.
And stay tuned for more wandering off of the beaten path on Skye.